I'm Reuben, and I'm the Managing Director at Smudge. Smudge is a software development firm that helps people solve problems in their business with custom software. We've created this series to help customers learn more about the software development process and the key things that set development projects up for success. So Tim, welcome to this episode of Solving Problems with Technology. So great to have you here. Tim has been at Smudge for almost 2 years now and works in helping our customers solve problems. It's great to have you here. I think it would be really great just to start with a little bit of your career background and kind of some of the things that you've done and how you ended up being interested in the software space.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. I think no one's career journey is ever normal, but for me it's been quite odd in general. I started off when I was about 14 working in kitchens and hospitality and sort of washing dishes and sort of building relationships with chefs who are an interesting bunch in and of themselves. But I really started to get engaged with technology when I started bartending as I sort of worked my way through the different businesses.
This was past just when you were 14.
Yeah. I think I was 16 when I started working in bars.
Okay.
But I couldn't start serving alcohol until I was 18, so I had to navigate those things as well. But when I started doing that, that's when I sort of first got introduced to technology being a part of a day-to-day job through the point of sale systems and having to, ring up the till for customers and sort of order food and all of those things. And that's really where I actually started to get a bit more interested in, well, how can I use this to make my job more efficient or better? And I started to learn how to configure things in the background so I could set things up for the team so that actually what I've got on my main screen is what I need at the different times of the day. And that became really relevant when I sort of started working in nightclubs and, there was music blaring, it was loud, the crowds were insane. So you needed things to work really efficiently for you.
So you were the go-to person. You've all got someone in our team who's the technical wizard who can come around but not just thinking about, I know how to do it, but how do I make this really good for everybody?
Yeah, exactly that. And I became a little bit of the person to call. I remember on a Saturday night getting a call at 2 a.m. because all of the FPOS terminals had gone down in the bar. And it's like, okay, I'll get out of my PJs, come in and sort this out, basically. So it was really about thinking, how do we make sure these things support the business? Because that's how we were making our money, was through sales and transactions. But after sort of being in hospitality for a while, I moved up to Wellington and went into retail because I had a family history with retail and I'd always enjoyed helping people out and really making sure I could get the right product for them depending on what they were doing. So I worked with R.M. Williams for a little bit, selling their boots, and then went into menswear, selling suits with Rembrandt, a New Zealand-based company. And again, that was a really great experience to understand how the point of sale systems was helping sort of manage the process for customers. But the key piece for me was always making sure I could meet the customer where they were at when they were coming into the store, because often when people are coming in, particularly in menswear with suiting, they've got a specific thing in mind. Is it a wedding they're going to, or do they have a black tie event or something like that? And depending on what they were coming in to see me for, was really important because it meant that's how I could cater their experience as they were kind of going through the sales process as well. Because if it's a wedding, then generally they're excited and they're wanting to make a real day of it. But if it's, say, they're preparing for an interview, then actually the mindset they're in can be really different, and making sure they get the right advice and feedback from me is the important thing there. After doing that for a few years, I started working with police. I went first into the Police Infringement Bureau, so that was really their ticketing service. So if you sort of speed past a camera and the camera snaps, that photo would come to me, and I'd basically take that rego and enter it into a database and basically do the query and produce the tickets. And that was my first exposure to technology that was functional but was lacking form. The system did what it needed to do, but it was very complex and difficult to navigate. And when you're thinking about the volumes of data we were needing to process, depending on how much pressure was on at a different time of the day, it could really, really impact just how you were feeling when you went to work. Essentially, it had a large impact. And then I actually only spent about 6 weeks in the Infringement Bureau, and then I got seconded into what's called the National Command and Coordination Centre. So
just what was your first interest in going into police in the first place? Because I think there's not there's often a reason for going and working in police or something.
Yeah, of course. It's quite a jump from retail as well. I think I'd always had an interest in public good. Sort of growing up, I was in the cadet forces, and I'd really thought about going into the Air Force or the Defence Force in that regard, and did a lot of amazing stuff through the cadet forces as well, but it really instilled sort of public service for me as well. And one of the big things for me with police was during the Canterbury earthquake sequence, I did some work with a local marae to sort of help them run their holiday program from our school, because when it was the school holidays, there was no one there, and we had an area that they could use, so we might as well set that up. But as a part of that, I got to do some work with some local police officers as well, and that was really my first exposure to police, not just as an enforcement mechanism, but as something that does real public good. So that sort of seed had been planted for a while, and when an opportunity came to work with the organisation, I sort of jumped on it. So that's really where that motivation came from.
Okay, and so then you spent 6 weeks in the Infringement Bureau, and then went to the National Command Centre?
National Command and Coordination Centre.
Okay.
Yeah. There's acronyms everywhere in police, you know. So went into there, and that really, again, was just by chance. I remember we did a tour of the building, and we went into the Entral C as a part of that during my first couple of weeks. And I thought, wow, this is a place where I really love to work. And when the opportunity came up, I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to get an opportunity to do that. But yeah, the Entral C it's an interesting beast. Essentially, you work with a senior sergeant as a shift coordinator and monitor the country using a whole number of different systems to monitor all the events of national significance that are taking place. So from homicides to fatal crashes to plane crashes, you name it, anything that was sort of significant that was happening in the country, my role was really to track that, and understand the social harm that was being done as a result of that, but make sure the organisation was appropriately informed so that we could do the best response we could, essentially. Because when something happens, yes, you've got the frontline staff who are responding, but often there's a whole branch of sort of government that needs to also respond to that as well. If you think about a car crash, it's not just police, there's ambulance, fire, but then there's also the roadwork services and the work that needs to happen after the event has happened itself. So I spent 2.5 years in that environment, working really closely with the Police Media Centre, keeping them informed so we could keep the public informed about what was happening every day as well. And worked on a range of really significant events as well, like the March 15th terror attacks and Whakaari White Island, the volcanic eruption there, and so many other things in between. So it really gave me a crash course in police as an organisation and the breadth of things that we do in our sort of day-to-day in that space. Often which is, you know, when you see sort of a news story on something that's happened, you often just think about that frontline response, but it really gave me the view of actually this is a big beast which is responding to these events.
I think that mirrors my experience as well from a policing perspective, in terms of, you know, from the outside perspective, you kind of maybe see a very surface level of what police looks like, and, you know, the actual amount of attention and care it takes to be able to respond to this wide range of different activities and events that happen is pretty significant.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's and it makes sense, right? Because the majority of us, when we're in the public, the main interaction we might have with police is if, you know, there's an enforcement mechanism taking place. You know, if you've been pulled over for failing to indicate or speeding or something like that. But actually, sometimes we can get quite a narrow view of what policing means in a New Zealand and international context as well. Yeah. Okay,
and so then, at what point did you start really going into software more deeply and start wanting to pursue this as a career? Where did that happen?
Yeah, so it was definitely in the Entral C. I think I've always had a knack for, if I see something that I find really interesting, I want to find out how it works and how it fits together. And one of the tools we were using in that environment was called REOD, Real-Time Intelligence for Operational Deployment. And I started to work really closely with the business owner for that to understand how I could make changes to that to help better support our role. Similar to, I think, what I did in that hospital environment. I wanted to make the tool really effective and easy to use for our team so we could get the best outcomes. And sort of the time that I was in the NCCC, that platform was actually going through a re-platform. So it was a chance for it to sort of move to newer technology, make sure we could leverage all the best parts of that application. And sort of through a confluence of events, I was able to become the product owner for that platform and help take it from not just the technical re-platform that was done, but take it through a user interface refresh and update as well. So it was a great opportunity because it was a way for me to sort of leverage my relationships with that NCCC team, but supporting all the police. There's all these district command centres, and they're people who use the tool as well. So it was a great chance to actually go and talk with them and meet them and actually understand what do we need this platform to do, and how do we take those needs and actually turn that into a product roadmap and vision and figure out how can we deliver these things. Because we all, I think, encounter applications or technology where we know what we want it to do, but how we actually get to that point is very hard to articulate or understand at times.
Yeah, and I think that leads on to a really, perfect segue into a topic that we can talk about around, where we sit, where a vision sits, and where like starting small sits, and kind of like how you actually move towards a vision. And I think there's some real detail there as well. Like, when you have a vision, you've got all these great ideas that you want to do, but also the path changes as you go and as you learn new information. And so there's this real ability to work at both the small level of the detail and the big picture. And so what does that look like for you? What's your experience like since working at Smudge and kind of helping customers with that kind of thing?
It's a really interesting one. I think often what happens is we go into solving these problems with the idea of we understand what the end goal is, that end vision. But when we really are breaking it down and starting small, we have to challenge a lot of the assumptions that we're making along the way to achieve that vision. Because I think it's something that happens in every technology project, is we think we've got a really good understanding of the problem and have a really clear pathway on how to solve that. But the devil is always in the details, and once you start to hit the ground and unpack these problems, I think in nearly every experience I've had, whilst we thought the problem was over here, it's actually been something further down or far more nuanced and niche than we initially thought. And I'm sure you've got experience with that as well.
Yeah, I always like to try and think, in terms of that vision piece, okay, of all the elements, what are the things that we've done before and we've got a pretty good understanding of, and what are the things that might be really new that we haven't seen done in a particular way, or if we don't know it's going to be successful, and then how do we just work on that piece that's brand new first, because that's often where we're going to get the most learnings.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think, if we're ever doing a project where we don't have much new stuff, we'll probably already have something that you can go and use, So it's like, I think part of doing things that are innovative is making something new. And so there's always going to be some pieces in there that are really tricky. And I see people sometimes make this mistake where you go, we'll go and build all the stuff that we know how to do first. And then you get to the end and you go, well, we didn't know how to do this piece. And then now this changes a lot of assumptions. And so maybe even the whole way you think about the user interface, or even just the way you think about, well, is this even an app format, is it a web format, is it even any of those things at all? Is this actually not a technology problem? Yeah,
absolutely. Like, is the business process actually the thing that needs to change? Because often it's really easy to go, great, we've got this awesome business process, we know it works, now let's just digitize that, and that'll solve all our problems. And it's such an easy assumption to make, but often it's actually, there's a key part of the business process that if you change that or removed that, now the problem that you think you need to solve with that application doesn't exist. But I think that's the key part for us, right, is going in and making sure we're checking those assumptions and validating them and having open and transparent conversations.
I often find, particularly with larger organizations, if you only have the support of the IT part of the organization, it can be very hard to make real change, because often the problems aren't just a technology thing. And so often, if you've got a very senior leadership, whether it's a commissioner or whether it's a CEO, you've got their buy-in to why the change is going to happen. It gives you the opportunity to go out and say, ask the questions about the business process, ask why something's done a particular way, and then be able to influence and change it.
Oh, without a doubt. Like, I think it's very easy particularly in our industry, to think about if we're building an application or implementing a technical solution, that's the piece that is hard. I think a lot of the time, actually, there's a lot more that we know there. The hard part, in my experience at least, is actually the change management piece. And actually, it sounds very cliche, but when we say bringing the users on a journey, that's as much about making sure they understand why are we even solving this problem and validating that to begin with. And I think what happens a lot of the time is a business will go, cool, we've got the solution, we're going to build an app, and then talk to the users at the end of that process. And actually, when you start to talk to the users, that's when the real key piece about, well, hang on, that's not what our problem is. That's not the piece that we're struggling with. That's, the technology. For the technology to enable them, you need to have a really good understanding of actually what are they doing and what are their needs. But sometimes that's put in reverse, unfortunately, in that process, right? Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's the thing that's just really hard to get right. And particularly, we often talk about it from in the Smudge, we've done it as an imperfect circle, because the reality is when you're engaging with a lot of different people and different things over a period of time, you can never really reach perfection.
No.
Because, as soon as we make something new, or people using stuff outside of a work context, we've got such a range of tools, and you look at that and go, oh, I'd love to have something like that at work. And so there's never a fixed target either.
No.
And so, trying to get that balance right, and what are the users' needs, how do we really understand them and make something that's really crafted for solving both the business problems and the users' problems, and getting that right.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, like what I talked about in the start, when it came to first getting exposed to technology in a business context, the way that I was able to help people in that space was by actually understanding how does their role work, doing a bit of it down the life. And that's why I think doing that user research, yes, it's difficult, but the value and the return you get is so much more, because people can tell when you're actually trying to understand the problem and really want to actually provide genuine value. I think it's evident when you show up and do that.
I think that's such a good point. It's just the showing up and doing that in a genuine way, and you're there because you actually just want to understand. I think sometimes it's easy to get lost in the frameworks and go, I'm going to do this exercise and do this exercise, and I've done those. And actually the point of the exercises is just about the understanding.
Yes.
And so once you build that understanding, you can help co-create and help make good decisions. But from an organizational perspective, and especially a management perspective, a manager wants to go and say, oh no, we've done the process and the process has been good. And it's a lot safer to say we ticked all these boxes than it is to turn around and go and say, no, we're going to show up and want to understand these users. Because it's harder to say that, what's the outcome? Oh, Tim understands the users. Okay.
Exactly. And requirements gathering is a classic example of that. I think it's often treated as just a box ticking exercise, and great, we've gathered the requirements, but actually if we haven't validated those, and if we haven't confirmed with a decent number of people, actually, yes, those are right, and challenge some of our assumptions, we can go in thinking, great, we know this is the process, and then every user we talk to will go, no, that's completely wrong. And that's an uncomfortable position to be in. It challenges your legitimacy, and it can be uncomfortable, but it's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can so easily become just a laundry list of, here's every single thing that I want solved in my life. And so...
and they're all musts. We must have all of these things.
Exactly.
Like, okay.
And often they compete. And so, you can't have something that's really fast and also comprehensive. Because actually, there's, it would take 20 minutes to download that amount of data on the fastest possible connection that you could. And so that's not going to make something fast. And so you've often got to make a choice. And to make a choice, you have to really understand that underlying need.
Without a doubt, I think my time as a product owner and in this role at Smudge is often I am challenging people on what is the highest priority thing to do. And that's not to back people into a corner and sort of put the onus of making a decision on them. But not everything can be priority one. We really have to think about these things, and the fact that there will be something that is higher priority than something else is natural. Like if you write a to-do list and everything must be done on it, generally not everything's going to be achieved, right? So being realistic about it, but also really thinking about it makes the difference when it comes to the outputs that are done and the outcomes you get for the users as well.
So I've talked a lot about kind of those features, where they sit, how we get the right balance between them. Where do you stop, like features stop providing a benefit? Where do you think there's kind of that line of, okay, what is, we talk about MVPs, what is an MVP? What actually is feature complete? Where does that line sit? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, it's something that I think is unique to each customer, and you really have to have some hard conversations about what is the value we're bringing, what is the value we're bringing with this product or this app or this solution. I think a lot of the time, whilst it's not seen as the exciting thing, having the basic functionality and doing the basics really, really well is more beneficial than a new feature or this functionality that you're seeing a lot of other people doing. We know in the industry at the moment, there's a huge focus on AI and how can I use this in my business. But if you don't have the use cases well defined, or if your user base doesn't understand the intention of why have you introduced this thing, you could invest so much into that and not get the outcomes you're wanting to get for your product or for your business. Whereas often, if we think about the applications we use daily, it's the basic functionality and getting that basic functionality right, which makes the difference. There's an example that I got really frustrated with just as a user when I think it was Facebook and Instagram updated their search to include this AI tool. It's like, oh, you can search with AI, it's going to be great. And every time I would search for, something, it would then give me this giant GPT output of like, oh, this is what this thing is about. And it's like, this isn't what I'm wanting as a user. Like, you've just taken this functionality that's shiny, implemented it, and you've made my experience worse. So it's those, I think those are the things that you really have to think about when it's new feature versus actually what is the benefits of the product that you're delivering, and are you doing the foundational things really well?
There's a real tension there between, particularly on mobile, you get such a limited amount of screen space. And so doing the basics well and then working out, well, if people are pushing something for a particular reason, then it just means that you've got to put it up higher up the screen. And and it just means it ends up where it goes. Yeah. So what about from a technology perspective? Where do you see an app fitting, a website? Have you got kind of a view around that sort of piece?
Yeah, I think one of the things that is easy to fall into the trap of is there's a problem, be it a business process problem or there's a need. Sometimes it's really easy to go, we need an application for that or we need a website for that. And whilst I think we understand that desire, often it's as much about like reviewing the process that we were talking about as well. I think what you have to do, and I mean, I'm sure you've got some examples of this as well, is really understand, is it a business process problem or is it a software problem? Because yes, we can always build something, but software development isn't easy by nature. It's a really challenging process. So you need to make sure that you've validated the problem first before committing to that, because otherwise you can get into the situation where, like what we were saying before, if you haven't validated the problem early on, you could really go down the software development pathway that's not necessary or doesn't actually solve the problem.
Yeah. And you can actually, there's good examples where you can use software for creating art.
Yeah.
And that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. But I think most of the time when we're talking with customers, we're not trying to create artwork.
Exactly.
We're trying to create things that solve a problem and really help someone with your real sense of utility.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think as a team here as well, one of the things that's so important to us is that we are helping customers solve a genuine problem, solve a genuine business need with really great technology. But if we are questioning, well, actually, does this solve the problem, or is there actually something else going on here, then that's when it's sort of incumbent on us to actually raise that with the customer as well, I think, and actually say, hey, there could be something existing that does this for you, so you're not going down the custom software development route isn't going to solve the problem necessarily, or there are other ways that you can achieve the outcomes you're looking for with existing tools.
Well, I think this has been a really great conversation. Thanks so much for taking the time with me just to talk, and look forward to continuing to work together.
Same here.
Thank you for watching. We really hope that you got something out of this conversation. If you have any questions that have arisen, please reach out on our website, smudge.com.